Things happen the way they're supposed to, whether you believe in a higher force, a higher being, or the stars.
Welcome to Creativity with Purpose, where we explore the stories, struggles, and sparks that shape our creative lives. I'm your host, Ann Mracek, author, healer, and believer in the power of meaningful expression. Together, we'll dive deep into what it means to create with heart, live with intention, and heal through the beauty of storytelling.
Hello, I'm Ann Mracek, and this is Creativity with Purpose. Today we're talking with Beverly Williams. Beverly is a partner in Wong Fleming, a global law firm headquartered in Princeton, New Jersey, and the author of Your GPS to Employment Success: How to Find and Succeed in the Right Job and Get the Job Done. She served as a regular employment law guest on Court TV. Beverly earned her Bachelor's of Arts in Political Science from Douglas College, Rutgers University, a Master's of Public Administration from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and a Juris Doctorate from Rutgers School of Law, Newark, New Jersey. Several years ago, she began Parthenon Enterprises and Your Employment Matters, to provide cost-effective, user-friendly solutions to enhance individual productivity in the search for employment and career development. Her mission is to help financially and socially challenged and underserved individuals improve their employment experience. Hi, Beverly. It's great to see you.
Thank you for that introduction. I'm thinking, oh, maybe I'll take notes. I like the way she phrased that. No, you really captured what my mission, my passion, what I'm doing. And
well,
why.
I found it so interesting because obviously you're a lawyer, your background's in law, and yet you have kind of pivoted from the way I see it to wanting to serve others, find employment, and find their purpose in life. Is that an accurate?
It is. And to achieve success in employment situations, because I found that from watching television, people on television, talking to my friends' children, because I don't have any biological children, and just talking to people generally, they didn't have, in my opinion, a realistic approach to employment.
Yes.
It seemed like they were waiting or expecting to be anointed and moved along and be promoted without doing anything to promote themselves, to market themselves, or to ask questions about whether they were performing at a level that warranted, that justified promotion.
Right. So
it's showing up is not enough.
Right. Exactly. So it seems like you wanted to empower them to have an actual method by which they can promote themselves.
Exactly. And not only a method, but a mindset.
Yes.
You must prepare yourself to be in a position so that you are considered for promotion. And if you're not considered, what are your options? How do you bring yourself to the forefront? What are you doing that may be hindering your advancement?
Yes, exactly. So that ability to stand back and get a perspective from the employer's frame of mind, perhaps.
Exactly. They're the decision makers.
Yes.
They're the ones that are going to be deciding who gets promoted and who doesn't.
Yes, exactly.
And even job seekers, and this is something I know I never thought of when I was looking for employment. We tend not to think of the employer's needs. What I recommend is creating a win-win situation. You tell the employer, the hiring manager, whoever you're interviewing with, these are my talents, these are my skills, this is what I've done so far, this is how I can, and then you talk about how you can add value to the employer.
Yes.
So it's a win-win. And so when if you reach the next level of interviews, then you tell the manager, I can make your job easier. I'm going to be there for you. Here's how I will do it. I will come to work on time every day. I'll be there early. If you need me, you call me. I'll be there. Now, if you're not prepared to do that, don't make that representation. Be honest and authentic. But if you need a job and you want to be successful, you have to market yourself and you have to own your own career.
Yes, absolutely. What do you hope your book does for people who feel unseen, unheard, unsure?
You know, it's interesting that you should ask that. There was a woman that I met in a book group. You know, you read the drafts of your book to other authors, and this woman was there, and I told about what my book was about, and I read excerpts. And after the meeting, she came up to me and asked me, if I would help her. Now, ordinarily, I'm not a person who meets strangers well. You know, but when I started down this path, I had to open myself up.
Yes.
I had to step outside my comfort zone or my want to zone. And so I said, I had to stop myself. And I said, Beverly, this is just what you're supposed to do. This is why you're doing what you're doing, what you're trying to do. Of course, you should help her. And I did. And she got a job. She not only got the job, it was amazing. She had skills, though. Make no mistake. She had skills, but she was licensed in another state. And her husband had moved to this area. She didn't know anyone, and she said no one would help her. So I told her what to do. I said, practice how you're going to sit in the interview with your interview clothes on, because at the time they were still doing interviews live. This was before COVID. And she did everything I suggested that she do. She got offered a job at 2 or 3 levels above the job she applied for. She and her husband took me out to dinner because she was so thrilled. And I said, you did the work.
Yeah, exactly.
You did the work. And that's what people don't understand. You can't just show up. You have to do the work.
Yeah. And, oddly, sometimes people think they don't even have to show up.
You know what I've been hearing? Yeah. Someone told me that people are interviewing virtually. And they're getting the interview out of the park, but they're not the one that shows up when they're hired. They do so well, they're hired, but the person who shows up is not the person they interviewed.
I understand. Yeah. You have to have that genuine heart of authenticity, and you have to be willing to give value, like you were saying. Yeah, exactly. And that's not once, that's every time. That's daily.
Every day, exactly.
Yeah, every day. Yeah, absolutely. If you could whisper one thing in your reader's heart, what would it be?
Be authentic and be reliable.
There you go.
And pay attention to detail. And be your authentic self.
Yeah.
Don't go into an interview if you're a male, a suit and a tie, or a female, whatever your gender, in wearing what you're not going to continue to wear once you get hired. Because you're not being authentic. And
Yeah.
I'm not saying if you want to go to work in flip-flops and jeans, if that's going to work for you, you show up at the interview like that.
There you go.
That's a decision you have to make. You know, you don't have, in this day and age, we're not dressing that formally, but
Yes.
you have to look like you are presenting yourself so that you will not do or wear anything that might embarrass your employer,
Well, yeah,
especially if you have a client facing job.
right. I think it's a matter of respect, right?
That self-respect and respect for your employer.
Both, right? Both.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. And also a level of respect for the clientele,
Exactly.
right? Because if we come with a servant's heart and wanting to be the best we can be, that includes everything. That includes our language, our attitude, our presentation, right? Because we have to not only love ourselves, but we have to have the servant's heart as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. No, you're right. You're absolutely right. But we don't, okay, when you're unemployed, you want a job and that's your focus. And
Yes.
typically you're singularly focused. You're not thinking about the employer, you're thinking about your needs.
Yes.
You have to pay the rent, you have to pay the car note, you want to go on vacation. Those are the drivers, but if you create a win-win, I think you'll have better success.
Yes, I agree with that. I definitely agree with that. So, what unexpected doors or unexpected conversations has writing this book opened for you?
You know, after I wrote the book and it was published, I got an offer. And the offer was very attractive. But I wasn't mentally prepared to embark on that path.
Okay.
And I didn't want to say yes and not be successful.
Yes, to fully.
You know what and I didn't want to stress myself out.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
yeah.
So I said, okay, wait, just, you can't do it. You just can't do it. And then something went off in my mind and it said, why don't you take your own advice? What did you say in the book? Take advantage of all opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
Consider them seriously because they may not present themselves a second time.
That's right.
And I said, why don't you ask for more time?
Mm-hmm.
Ask for another 6 months within which to make my decision. And they said yes.
There you go. Yeah. And I think sometimes we don't realize that resources aren't just money. Resources can be time. Resources can be mindset.
Yes.
Resources can be the grace of someone else.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But if you're not going to put your best foot forward, you don't want to accept an offer that's going to work to your detriment.
Oh,
because
absolutely.
Talk about personal brand. There's a lot of discussion about you don't want to damage your brand.
Right. Exactly. Well, and sometimes it's just where you are in life.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. When I was very young, obviously, I just had my first daughter, my baby. And so I had this infant in arms, right? I got an offer, a serious offer to tour Europe for 3 years and be an opera singer, a lead opera singer.
Wonderful.
The catch was I would have had to have left my daughter at home. I couldn't travel with a child. Oh. Well, it was a non-option at that point, right? It had been a life's goal of mine to do this, to travel and to sing. And yet it was the wrong time. It was just it was an impossible timing, and it was a sacrifice I wasn't willing to make. So I
But
let
you
that one
made
go
the
by.
choice. Yes,
But
but you made the choice.
right, you have to make these choices in life.
Yes.
And sometimes things present themselves that really are just not actionable. And yet, other times, if we think, well, maybe if I apply a little creative tap dance to this, I can at least take advantage of some of this opportunity, if not all, on a different timeline.
You're absolutely right. Depending on what the situation is,
Mhm.
you can make a counter offer.
Sure,
You know, thought,
sure.
think about it. Don't say no. Just don't say no. You know, think about it and maybe come up with an alternative that might work
Absolutely.
better for you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So here's a silly one. If your book had a theme song, what would it be? That's a musician in me coming out.
The Rocky,
Oh, right.
the rock, and Katy Perry's, oh God, what is it? Oh, what is the name? I quoted it, I cited in the book. Her,
Oh,
I can't remember the name of it. It's you're a rocket, you're a superstar or something. I don't remember, but those are the two. It's like they're like songs. They're like songs of encouragement.
yeah.
It's like you can do it. You're great. You're all that in a bag of chips. Go get it. Those are the songs that I want people. Those type of songs, perhaps not those specifically, but whatever gets you moving and
Sure.
pumps you up, puts you in a positive frame of mind and makes you feel good about yourself and what you're doing. Unfortunately, one of my dear friends that we went to law school and the same law school at the same time, but he went to law school during the day. I worked a full-time job and
Oh,
I went to law school at night.
and you slept when? From 2 to 3 a.m.? Is that about it?
But we clerked for the same Supreme Court justice in New Jersey.
Oh, how interesting.
It was real. Oh God, it was
Yeah.
really interesting. And we became very close. And there was a third clerk. The three of us became close. So this guy was one of the peer reviewers on my book. And but he committed suicide a year or so after the book was published.
Oh,
And fortunately for me, I had the presence of mind to start the book with preparing yourself mentally, emotionally, and physically. But if I had known about his vulnerability, I would have devoted more to more of a discussion about that. But I had page limitations.
well, sure. Of course you do. And sometimes we just don't know what's below the surface.
But
Yeah.
that makes me, I'm donating some of the proceeds from the sale of the book
Uh-huh.
to NAMI, the National Alliance of Mental Illness,
Oh, yes.
because that made me realize how vulnerable job seekers really are, because you don't know people's circumstances.
Sure.
And there's a level of desperation that comes with looking for a job. And when you couple that with the fragility of the psyche,
Yeah.
that can be combustible.
It can be.
And
Yeah.
I want to do more in that regard, because you'll find a job if you do the work and you have the requirements that they're looking for, and you present yourself in a professional fashion. But if you don't get the jobs that you want, it doesn't mean you're not worthy. Don't let this journey marginalize you.
Right. Well, and we are not the jobs we occupy.
But some people think I have friends who define themselves through their jobs.
Yeah, and I find that unfortunate. I have had such an incredibly diverse career, a number of crazy jobs, and yet they were all just fun expressions of my creative self in all different faceted ways. Okay. But I am not my job, just like I am not the traumas that I survived as a child, right? How I react to them is more defining than the incident itself. How I move forward and forgive not only myself, but others is more empowering and freeing. And so, yeah, I think we have to understand that a lot of us have self-doubt, programming, even from childhood, that maybe is no longer serving us. And sometimes, though, that's the undercurrent that we need to deal with, really, even before we step into, say, a new situation like a new job. I had a very troubled and challenging, shall we say, childhood. And that was the impetus for me writing my book, Unpacking the Attic. I needed to deal with all of the self-doubts and negatively impacting old programming that I received as a child in order to move forward and be empowered and to step into a transformed new reality of myself. And I think sometimes that hard work we need to understand needs to be done within.
Well, unfortunately, everyone's not capable of doing that on their own. And sometimes people are reluctant to seek the help to seek the assistance that might benefit them in making that transformation. Fortunately, that has not been my experience.
Good.
But I recognize that it is the experience of people I care about.
Yeah.
And it's difficult for them to overcome earlier life-changing or life-affecting situations because it formed who they are.
Well, and yet I found that I was able to look back on these childhood experiences and distance myself, back up, quit triggering the childhood emotional response and reframe it now with an adult perspective. To offer forgiveness to the people who were in those scenarios, because that frees the forgiver, right? They no longer have free rent in my soul, shall we say? And to reframe these memories. For example, I had a grandfather who would not talk to me. The only two words I ever remember him saying to me were "sit down." And that was really tough. All I ever wanted to do was sit in his lap. Well, as a toddler, I internalized Pop doesn't love me. Therefore, I am unworthy of being loved. And I carried that scenario for me, within myself for decades. It wasn't until Unpacking the Attic came along, when I was journaling and writing down these childhood memories as I emptied my parents' home, that I realized I needed to stand back and look at the world through Pop's eyes. And I realized he was in deep mourning and in deep grief for the loss of his wife, my grandmother.
Yes.
And he had no bandwidth in his heart for a toddler. So it really, as a child, I had no way of knowing this. I had no way of backing up, seeing that perspective. And as children, we think we're the causation of everything in our worlds, right? We're all little narcissists. So because we
Well,
have no
we have
other frame of
limited, but
reference.
we have limited
Right.
knowledge
We don't
and
have the
experience.
ability. Yeah, we don't
Yeah,
have the ability to stand
exactly.
back and see those other circumstances, right? So it occurred to me that Pop was just in deep mourning. And I ended up writing his spirit a letter. Now, he'd
Oh,
been
wow.
gone for decades, but I wrote this letter and I put it in a green bowl representing that big overstuffed chair he used to sit in, and I lit it. And as that smoke rose, I had such a download of forgiveness and love for him. It was transforming. And I
Great.
no longer carry that scenario within my mind that I am unworthy of being loved. I understand now it had nothing to do with that little toddler sitting on the couch that was told to sit there, and I sat there in fear. I gave her permission to get up off that couch and to find her voice.
Right.
Right. And I think
Wonderful.
so often we need to do that. We need to revisit sometimes these experiences and say, okay, that was then, this is now. I'm an adult now. I am an empowered spirit that can offer forgiveness and perspective and choose how I'm going to react to or not that situation. Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. I'm glad you were able to do that.
Yeah. And I think everyone has to understand that they're powerful spirits. Human beings are immensely powerful. We can manifest our own reality. And I think by choosing how you're going to react or not, by choosing whether you're going to forgive, right? By choosing to reframe and repurpose old memories, we can empower ourselves for a better future. And I really think that your goal is partly that, to empower people to manifest their own new future and to see that bright new possibility on the horizon.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because employment is not the way it used to be.
No.
People worked for the same company for 35, 45 years.
And got
That's
the
not
gold watch,
happening.
right?
That's right. That's not happening.
No.
And you shouldn't expect your boss to determine to say, "Oh, you're doing so well. I'm gonna promote you." If you leave that to someone else, you're giving them control over your future,
Yeah.
and that may not be the best thing for you.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. And I think that belief in our own potentiality is crucial.
Absolutely, and it's essential um, because it gives you ownership of how you move forward.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that's important.
Yes.
But the other thing that's important is how you handle the discussions
Mm-hmm.
around promotion, around your employment situation. It's important to handle it in a professional fashion, without elevated voices or
Right.
negative vibrations. It needs to be just a calm discussion. Tell, how am I doing?
Right.
Some people don't
Right.
get performance reviews. If you don't, you can think you're doing well, but if you haven't heard you're doing well, and if you haven't seen it in writing, then maybe you should ask.
Right. Exactly. And not just for ego, set ego aside.
Oh, yeah, no, right.
Again, it's for how can I make your day great?
Exactly. Because
Yes.
if you approach it the win-win again,
Yes.
that manager is going to want to do more for you because
Exactly.
he knows or she knows you're in his or her corner,
Yeah,
and it's going to benefit them.
exactly. And I think we should come at that not with criticize me, what am I doing wrong? Throw that aside. You don't want to have him thinking about what you're doing wrong. That's not the mindset you want your employer to
Right.
have. You want to ask, and the question we ask is very important. Again, how can I make your life easier? How can I make your day great?
Right.
What else can I do to help you?
Exactly.
And then
And
he
to help
looks at
the
you as,
company. And to
yeah,
help the company.
exactly. Then all of a sudden you're an ally holding the same or pulling the same ship forward, and you're seen that way. You're seen as a team player. You're seen as an ally and an asset. So don't walk in there and ask for criticism. What am I doing wrong? Oh, heavens no. That's counterproductive to both you and the company.
Well, that's why I say, how am I doing? Because then you're right. You don't want to come in, what am I doing wrong? That presumes that you're doing something wrong, and you may not be. But I'm telling you, they don't usually go in saying, what am I doing wrong? They usually go in and say, I want a promotion. I mean, a friend of mine told me that someone who was working with her and they started at the same day told her if she didn't get a promotion in 6 months, she was leaving.
Oh, wow. That's not a good mindset to start with. That becomes what do we call it? Self-fulfilling prophecy.
But, yeah. The expectations are not realistic or reasonable.
Yeah, exactly.
So we have to manage those.
Exactly. Yeah. Silly question. If your creativity had a mascot, what animal would it be and what would it be wearing?
Well, if my creativity had a mascot, it would probably be it would probably be a witch, because I'm not creative at all. It is I am in awe of people who dance. Now, I'm a good actress.
There you go. See, that's creative.
But I don't litigate anymore. So I'm not in court before a judge, doing that. Mm-hmm. But when I say a witch, it's like something that isn't ominous, but something that is, I think of a witch's laugh, because I'm not creative. I'm just not creative. And I know that about myself. I know my limitations, and that's one of them.
Well, sometimes I think we tend to box in the word creativity to mean I paint, I play an instrument, okay? But honestly, I think everything you're talking about is creativity. I think it's a way to view the world in a empowered, out of the box mindset. And I think that's very creative.
I guess it's because there are people in my family that are artists.
See, yeah, but that's a limiting view, I think.
And there are those that can sing, and those who think they can sing who can't sing. So, it's like, I can't sing, but I know all the words to the songs.
There you go.
I can sing them, but nobody wants to hear it. But I'm creative in business.
Right, exactly.
Maybe I'm creative in business. Okay.
Of course. Well, let's put it this way. You've authored a book. You're published.
Yes.
Writing is a creative process, right? The ability to take that abstract idea and formulate it into those sentences that are going to be able to communicate to someone else.
I never thought of it that way.
Creative process. Absolutely.
I think of it as, this is what I know, and I'm sharing it with you.
Okay.
And so creativity doesn't rise to my mind. It's like, it's informational.
Okay. But yet it has to be presented in a way that the other person can take it in and utilize it, right?
I'm good at that. I'm good at conveying information to people of all ages. They may not like the way it's conveyed. Mm-hmm. If it's information that they're not happy to receive.
Yes.
But
yes.
I always present myself, make myself available to discuss it.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And Frank's children call me. I got a call not too long ago. Bev, I can't talk to my parents about this. I'm going to need to talk to you because you're going to give it to me straight.
Isn't that wonderful?
I know.
Yeah.
Mother's Day was just, I was moved to tears. I got so many lovely Mother's Day messages. I was like, oh my goodness, you don't know. I don't know how I, what I say and what I do affect, especially young people that I care about.
Right. Well, you put that pebble in the brook and the ripples go out, right? And I think when you are putting pebbles of love in that brook,
I'm
what comes
concerned.
back is always tenfold, right? Because when we give, our hands are open.
Yes,
And in order to receive, our palms have to be open so that we can take back in, right?
exactly. And nothing
It
comes to
takes
you
the
with a
giving
closed
first,
hand.
right? It takes the giving first
Yes,
in order to be able to receive, right? Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
I'm concerned that people, remember when they were talking about the great resignation
Hmm.
and they were saying in the media, oh, the employees are, in charge now. They're leaving their jobs. And I'm thinking, what employees are in charge? Are they curing cancer?
Yeah,
No.
no,
And I'm
no.
like, really? And a friend of mine called and she said that she had a friend whose husband was working remotely and
Uh-huh.
his HR person had called him and said, we're going back into the office.
Oh, uh-huh.
And the husband said, well, I'd like to continue to work from home.
Yes.
The HR person said, I'll get back to you about that. 2
Okay.
days later, the HR person called the man back, said, we accept your resignation.
Oh, how about that?
Okay.
Yeah. So we move on, right?
Uh, um, he had no choice. And
Right,
that
right.
was not the only time I heard that type of story.
Hmm.
If you're not going to resign, don't tell your boss what you're not going to do if it's work and it's legal. It's a legal. Uh, a valid request that your employer has made. If you're not going to do it and you don't want to quit your job, don't tell them that you don't want to do it. Say, okay, and see what you can do to move yourself around, find another
Sure,
job. But
sure.
you keep your options open
Hmm.
unless you can afford to do without a job.
Right, right. Exactly. And there aren't too many of us that are in that position,
No. But it
right?
seems that these people think that they are. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah,
you
yeah.
have to understand, you were working in an office before COVID. They're not asking you to do anything that you didn't do before.
Right, exactly. So
So
let me ask you this. How does your book reflect your mission or your deeper calling as a writer?
it's phase one.
Okay.
The next phase. I think what I'm going to do is I've been very fortunate with my podcast, Your Employment Matters,
Yes.
available wherever podcasts are.
Yes.
Spotify, Apple. It's also available on my website, youremploymentmatters.com. But I I just I've been very fortunate to interview very knowledgeable people, people with extremely interesting employment journeys, people who've had setbacks that rose above them.
Yes. Yes.
Um, one former NFL player um, was on a plane going to work out for the New England Patriots. He had no, he had lost his other spot with another franchise. He had no money. His mother had paid for his ticket, but he had to. This was his last hope, and he was on a plane going on his way to New England, and he was sitting next to a man who looked extremely prominent. He
Okay.
was working on his laptop. He
Yeah.
had a very impressive watch, was wearing a very impressive watch. And the guy said, for some reason, he doesn't know why. He's never done this before. He asked the man if he would help him.
How about that?
And the man put down, closed his laptop and
Yeah.
asked him, how can I help?
Isn't that phenomenal? Yeah.
And that young man became a vice president in the man's tech company in California.
What a wonderful story. Yeah.
And when I heard that story,
Yeah.
I knew that I had to put it in my book. And I was over my page limit. But that was something I think people need to hear. Sometimes you have to step outside your comfort zone.
Yeah. And you have to ask, right?
You have to ask.
Yeah. And
You
often
don't ask.
people are thrilled to mentor someone.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Because they see that drive and that spark and that potential in you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So you have to believe in yourself in order to.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But out of the blue, he said he never did anything like that before.
Well, it sounds like it was very spirit-led.
Things happen the way they're supposed to, whether you believe in a higher force, a higher being, or the stars. Sometimes the stars are just aligned.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Well, a question I like to ask everyone. To you, what is a fulfilled life?
First of all, being upright and mobile.
Okay.
Being able to, quite frankly, do what I want to do the way I want to do it.
Okay.
And that means working with Your Employment Matters.
Yeah.
To empower people to achieve more employment success. And it's success as they define it, not as it's defined by someone else.
Yes. Yes.
And that's important to keep in mind. I've known people who have become lawyers, doctors, because that's what their parents wanted them to become. And that did not make them happy.
Right. It wasn't their own fire.
Exactly.
They were fueling. Yeah.
To thine own self be true.
Yes.
You know, it's important that success is that you define it for yourself and that you don't make the mistake of defining it for your children.
Yes. Very good. Exactly.
So that gives me fuel. That's how I see the rest of my life moving forward. And I have some other ideas about how I can do that. So I'm looking for corporate donors to donate copies of my book to underserved communities, and to sponsor Your Employment Matters. And in return, I will interview one of their employees. So they get, the employer gets promoted, but I'll also donate my time to conduct training based on the book.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful.
So that's what I'm trying to do. But I don't have a nonprofit, but I'm working to affiliate myself with a nonprofit because I don't want to have to go through creating another organization.
Right. I understand. Right.
Wonderful. I got Parthenon and Your Employment Matters.
Right, yes. Your plate's pretty full.
It is.
Yes, which is wonderful. And
excuse me. Plus, I write legal articles for journals and newsletters. So, yes, it is full.
It's a lot. And what does creativity with purpose mean to you?
It means doing what you love in furtherance of a goal.
There you go. I love that.
Now, the goal depends on the person.
Absolutely.
For me, this is it. This is what I want to do. And
Wonderful.
I want to do it on a large scale. I've got a whole marketing plan for different ways to improve productivity from employees.
Excellent.
By empowering them to do what they do better.
There you go.
And to make them feel good about what they're doing.
Excellent.
And about themselves.
Wonderful. Well, Beverly, this has been a delight. I think we will end there. It's been wonderful talking to you.
And I'm going to say it again. You're very generous. And that I can't say about everyone.
Thank you.
It's I appreciate the interview. And I want to interview you on your employment matters, because your employment journey has been so eclectic.
It's been quite unique.
And seriously, but it lets people know that you're not wedded to one way of doing things,
Absolutely
one way
not.
of living, one
right.
way of earning a living. You can follow your passion, you can change, you can pivot, you can do many things.
Exactly.
And you just have to be flexible.
Right. And I feel you have to follow that passion to its fullest logical conclusion and then pick up another one, right?
Right. And
exactly.
if you don't know what your passions are, either they will come to you or you can look for them.
Yeah, exactly. Just do the thing that excites you, that makes you want to get up in the morning, right?
Yes, exactly.
Well,
exactly. Wait just a minute. Let me before. I was excited about getting up this morning because I knew that I was going to do this at 11 o'clock. And I was like, okay. So that made a difference because I worked late last night. I had some stuff I had to get done because I'm writing an article about collaboration.
Oh, there you go.
Collaborative law.
Lovely.
There's that going on. And that's a good thing that we're collaborating.
Yes, it is. Yes. Well, thank you so much and talk to you soon.
Thank you, Ann. Until next time.